Just got the headsets installed and the forks cut at Velotrap. They always do a bang-up job. Highly recommend them. Let me know in the comments below if I should build up the Tyrant Beastie first or the Tyrant Legacy first. Oh, who's gonna win? I'm building up the Tyrant Legacy by popular demand. Now I gotta take everything off my bike. Sorry, Gary, I'll be seeing another bike for a while. Oh no. Why is the lazy way harder? I really don't want to have to take off this pedal. Unfortunately, I've reached the conclusion that it would be way easier if I do it the right way and take off the pedals. So this bike review, it's gonna be interesting. Wait, hold on. This way tightens, so this way loosens. This is gonna be interesting because I've never done a bike review like this where I'm building up the bike. Ooh. And so I'm just swapping all of my parts over. So I'm going to pretty much be able to get a one-to-one comparison of what my bike ride's like versus the review bike. And I've also moved away from bike reviews in recent years. One, because I was traveling a lot and just trying to get bikes to a country where I don't even know how to get mail at my shipping address would be a logistical nightmare. And two, a lot of the bike reviews I've done were for beginner bikes, which, if I'm being honest, a lot of them are just pretty much the same bike, if not the exact same bike. They weren't a ton of fun for me to ride, especially when I'm riding something like my Wabi Special that's built up like baller status. And then it's just not super interesting where it's like, this bike is the exact same as this bike, so go buy the cheaper one. Yay, what a ton of fun. So I'm actually really excited to build up these Tyrants because I'll be using my own parts and have a bit more of a scientific understanding where more variables are controlled, where I can understand how much the frame set is influencing the ride quality of my bike so that I can tell you whether you guys should go buy it or not. Also, these frame sets are a lot nicer, so that's sick. Zach, why don't you have a bike shop? Because then I'd have to work on people's bikes for a living. And mine is well maintained, and I'm already struggling. There you go. That's a lot of hair in my bottom bracket. 3 months of riding in the rain, still packed with grease, still running smoothly. Maybe I've turned a new leaf in the abusive relationship that is the Sugino 75 bottom bracket, or any NJS bottom bracket. Whose hair is this? I have a love-hate relationship with this bottom bracket because on one hand, it is the smoothest riding bottom bracket I've ever tried. And on the other hand, it's the most finicky bottom bracket I've ever tried where if you even think about rain, it starts clicking. But for the past 3 months or so, I've been riding this bottom bracket, loose ball bearing and all, in Taiwan during rainy season, and it's been fine. But there's still grease in there. Like, I'm telling you, a ton of rain, torrential downpour of rain. In one day during the typhoon season, Taiwan got more rain than California gets in a year. Like, it was a lot of rain. Other than the outside of the bottom bracket, it's still looking pretty clean. It's still running smoothly, so I'm just gonna keep going. Is it happening? Did she change? This right here is the good stuff. It's hard to clean when your bike is all put together. Oh yeah. Immediately feels like a new bike again. I didn't mean to do that, but that works. I'm sorry, Gary, but we'll be taking a break. I'm going to be riding other bikes. By the way, sorry if this is unprofessional, but I have this DW Performance Series made in the USA Maple 5-piece drum kit, snare and all. It's for sale. I just got a new drum kit. It's a little one, much better suits my needs. So if anybody is in the Sacramento area and is looking for a dream drum kit, maybe check out my Reverb link in the description. That'd be sick. And then I could buy more bike stuff. One thick seatpost. The seatpost is a 31.6 millimeter, which is really unique. I've never seen that on a steel bike before. And the bull moose bars are just the handlebar for this build. Like, it just looks so perfect. I left 20 millimeters of spacers because it's not my bike. I didn't want to just slam the stem and send it back to some poor unsuspecting soul. Also, I just want to be more comfy. Why have spacers become so demonized? Like, spacers are great. The hardest choice that I have to make for this build is the chainring, because the Alter Shark chainring in this hard anodized bronze, it would definitely fit the whole vibe, but it doesn't really feel like me. And then I have this beautiful Alter Apollo chainring, limited edition, pink and purple splatter. My buddy Hal, he's the owner of Faith Gear, he's buddies with the owner of Alter. He got me this as a gift, and I haven't ridden this thing in a while, and the fact that there's just not enough color on this bike for me. You know, fixed gears are supposed to be fun. I don't like it when, you know, they're so mean and serious all the time. This combined with my summer floral toe cages, I think it'll just add just the right amount of pop. Oh, I forgot how sick this chainring is. A little more torque. But I don't want it to bind the bearings. Feels pretty good, pretty secure. No wiggling. I'm understanding this bottom bracket now. And I quite like it. I like how serviceable it is. Oh yeah, that is so smooth. There you go. Tina. That's really smooth. I've outdone myself this time. I'm noticing something a little bit curious with the wheel cutout, because when you have a wheel C-tube cutout, you want to tuck it as far in as possible, but still just allowing maybe a centimeter or two of clearance so that debris can escape and so that you're not scuffing up your frame set. But on this frame set, I'm running a 32C tire. This thing can run a 35C max, and it's a little weird because I'm getting clearance issues in the chainstay. The chainstays are dimpled to give you better clearance so that you can run a bigger tire and ideally get it into the cutout. But when I put my rear wheel in, that's about as close as I want it to get to the cutout. But now there's barely any clearance for the tire at the chainstay because it went past the dimples. So now the dimple is lining up with the rim, which doesn't need extra clearance, but the cutout is lining up with the tire, which does need extra clearance. So it just seems like a design flaw, honestly. And if the dimples were maybe like a centimeter forward, or maybe a centimeter and a half, 2 centimeters, something like that forward, then it would line up with the tire so that you could tuck it in behind the cutout. But again, I'm running a 32C tire. This thing is 35C max, so maybe it is different with 35s. So now I've lined up the tire with the dimples, and I am getting the rear wheel closer, but this is a big gap and you don't want to be able to stick your fingers through there. It looks a little strange because of that, you know, few centimeter dimple that needs to be more forward design. So this is as close as I want the tire to be in the cutout, but now it's just rubbing on the chainstays. There's just not enough clearance. I could get away with it if I was using a thinner tire, maybe a 25, but that's kind of lame to run a 25 when you could fit 35. So the closest I can get without rubbing is about there. And even then, maybe debris would get caught in the chainstays. And that's the thing with C-tube cutouts. While they look really sick on paper, when you're actually building, and a lot of people are building with different tire sizes and, you know, rim tire combinations, it doesn't always work out. And sometimes it just looks kind of lame when it doesn't work out, because it's like, you could see the vision is there, but the execution didn't make it possible. This is my first time building a bike with a C-tube cutout, so this is a learning experience for me too. But it does seem like it is a bit finicky to try to get your chain just the right length to be able to fit inside the cutout. Like, I just installed my chain. I'm not even tensioned up yet, and even after removing 2 links, I could just fit my hand in this cutout, which is just too big of a gap. And I'll take out 2 more links, but there is a chance that it just might not work out with certain gear ratios and tire combinations. Oh, it's so close. If I deflate my tire. So far, it's enough clearance. Now the question is, will the tire clear the chainstays with air in it? Oh, it just barely rubs. If I center it a little bit more perfectly, it might clear. All of this hassle just for this cutout. Oh my gosh. Okay, now it's just rubbing on the other side. Maybe 1.5 millimeters of clearance on the drive side, and then it's just straight up rubbing on the non-drive side. So yeah, I'm just running into the problem where this looks good and this clears well, but then the chainstays don't clear well because the dimple is apparently in the wrong place, and just it should be closer to the bottom bracket rather than back here. Like, the dimple's for the rim. Yeah, you could make this whole setup work with a half-link chain, but some people just don't like half-link chains. And to get the wheel in the cutout, everything has to be right. Like, you have to have the right tire size, you have to have the right gear ratio. Maybe you have to be using a half-link chain, because it's like, with my gear ratio, I have to add 2 more links, and at that point, like, the wheel will just barely be using the cutout, which is kind of a bummer. Honestly, this cutout, it looks really sick, but it only looks really sick when your wheel is slammed in there. And just the nature of how short you have to keep your chain to use the cutout, it just makes it harder to work on the bike because you have to deflate the tire to get the wheel out. As sick as it looks, it's not for me. Well, back to the old grind. So with a 49-17 gear ratio, a 32C tire, mounted to a Velocity A23, this huge gap is as close as I can get it with my setup. I don't want to use a half-link chain. I don't want to change my gear ratio. I don't want to change my ideal chain tension. Like, it's just not worth it for me. I'm someone that really prioritizes function over form. I know, which is weird because I ride Fixies, but like, this ain't it for me. I'm not doing this. I'm really hungry, and the sun's gone, so I'm gonna finish this thing. I'm no weight weenie, but the Legacy is feeling like a pretty hefty bike. Even when it was just a frame set, I thought it felt very substantial, and I didn't use any weight weenie components on here whatsoever. There's absolutely no carbon. The Nitto bull moose bars are completely made out of steel. The 31.6 seat post, I'm no rocket surgeon, but more material means more weight. And Brooks saddle is heavy on its own. I'm running tubeless, which is heavier than tubes. There definitely can be some weight savings here, but I don't really care to do that. This is just one of the builds that I normally run, and it's fun. I also have a bell. That's adding some weight. But yeah, locking grips, like, there's a lot of things that can go on with this bike that can make it lighter. I'm guessing it's above 20 pounds. Like, I'm guessing like 21.5 or something. 22.14. That's a whole lot of bike. And in world units, 10.4 kilos, just about. That's... Yeah. That's a lot of bike. If I swap to an aluminum stem and handlebar combo, like what most people are running, it'd probably knock off like 1.5 pounds. But yeah, just well over 20 pounds. Again, I'm no weight weenie. I mostly care about how the bike rides. Something I noticed is that both the top tube and the down tube are ovalized to give it a bigger diameter and some extra stiffness, and I expect this thing to ride super stiff. Speaking of stiffness, the seat post is a 31.6, and while that does limit some options, the only one that I can think of that's silver is the Velo Orange Grand Cru seat post, and even then it's like, oh, also the Paul Tall and Handsome, if you want to spend the big boy bucks. I run a Brooks saddle. It's the most comfortable saddle I've ever ridden. I don't want to ride anything else. And Brooks saddles, because they haven't been changed since like the 1880s, they have pretty short rails because they were designed for bikes with shallower seat-tube angles. And so to make them fit properly on modern bikes, you need more of a setback in your seat post to compensate for the short rails. But with more modern 31.6 seat posts, there aren't a whole lot of setback seat posts. Like, this thing needs like 25 millimeters or more of setback, and the vast majority of 31.6 seat posts are going to be 0 setback to 15 millimeters of setback, and honestly, it's just not enough options for seat posts depending on how you want to build this thing. Unless you want to spend $200 on a seat post and get a Paul Tall and Handsome. But because the seat post is bigger, that also means the seat tube can be bigger and make the bike overall stiffer. If I'm being honest, I'm a little bit anxious that this bike might even be too stiff and jittery and jolty for me because I tend to like more supple bikes, but to each their own. The way I like to build my bikes, we're just talking about fixie points now, I like to do classic and modern and blend these two together for a distinct look, but the Legacy is very just modern, at least with the gloss raw steel with the gold decals. Like, when I put my silver components on here, it looks a little bit out of place and kind of like it clashes against the gold decals. A gold chain would definitely pop on this bike, but in my opinion, a silver chain looks out of place. But an upside to the more understated and modern look is that this bike can handle color really well. This chainring really pops off. my toe cages, I think they look great on this bike. And if you want to do even like those crazy anodized hubs or chain rings, this can handle it all with ease and look really nice. Something I find a little strange is that on all the bosses, so for the rear rack and for the down tube and seat tube bottles, they don't provide you with the hardware to cover those holes, which is a little bit concerning because it's a steel bike. If it rains, rain gets inside there, it's going to rust the inside of the frame. It's just something to consider if you want to source your own hardware and really protect your frame. Also, the fact that it has mounts for a rear rack is pretty cool. I would have liked to see instead though, or even just in addition to the rear rack mounts, are mounts for a front rack, because most fixed gear riders, when we use a rack, we're usually using a front rack, mostly because it looks cooler. And riding with a rear rack on a fixed gear can be kind of sketchy. I've used to ride with a rear rack, I don't anymore, because when you're trying to whip and backpedal your bike around, it can get really squirmy with the weight in the back. So I personally feel more comfortable with a front rack on a fixed gear, especially when riding brakeless. The clear coat does chip a little when you install a rear wheel, or even a front wheel, I imagine. But you can just take some sandpaper and sand off that clear coat, and then you can have the raw steel patina over time and not have that scuffed up look. A C2 cutout does feel a bit wonky because of how many things you have to get just right. Those are my thoughts on the fixie points and the building up process and some of the design choices of the Tyrant Legacy. Now I'm going to go for a couple of rides and throw this thing off-road to see if it can handle it and to see just how stiff this thing is. Because the sooner I ride this bike, the sooner I can get back to this video sponsor, Wabi Cycles. Question for you, why do you ride bikes? Why does anybody ride bikes? And the answer is because it's fun. And why do I ride my bike a Wabi Special? Well, simply put, it's the most fun that I've ever had, throwing a leg over a bike. Having a really fun and beautiful bike, something that just puts a smile on your face, whether you're just looking at it or whether you're actually pedaling it, is a really powerful thing. If you want to get big, meaty, fast, fixie thighs like me, you gotta ride your bike a lot, and riding your bike a lot becomes effortless when it is something that is legitimately the best part of your day. And Wabi's able to do that with their bikes because they're all made out of top tier, lightweight steel tubing, from Rental 725 to Columbus Spirit tubing, which is some of the lightest steel tubing that money can buy. And Wabi's a legitimate bike shop based in Denver, Colorado. They're not just some warehouse shipping bikes to you. They want to make sure that you get on your dream bike right out of the box. So you can choose the fine details of your Wabi, down from your stem length, crank arm length, gear ratio. Wabi's bikes have literally changed my life. They're so good that I don't even own a car, and they're so good that it's the only bike that I care to own, and they encourage me to ride my bike every single day, which just makes every single day better. If you're interested in getting one for yourself, be sure to check out Wabi Cycles, linked in the description. Fixie famous shoutouts to Julian Corona, Brandon Black, Ted Onchi, Brent David, and Mohr Perez for helping to make these fixed gear and cycling videos possible through their support on Patreon. And remember that, too much talking. Life is short, but don't make it shorter, so be sure to ride your bike every day to be reasonably dangerous.